Started here.
Perfect.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm thrilled that you could join us today for our webinar, Delivering Resilience in Your Global Supply Chain, which is being led today by Tom Cook of Blue Tiger International. Usually I say someone is a subject matter expert, but I think Mr. Cook is just an overall expert. In fact, looking at the attendee list today, not only do we have people from Arkansas, not only do we have people from all over the United States, but we've also got people attending from across the globe. So that's just a testament to this man's expertise. So, Mr. Cook, thank you for being here today. My name is Jonathan Bricker, and I serve as the chairman of the Arkansas District Export Council. For my day job, I'm a commercial relationship manager with Regions Bank, located in Rogers, Arkansas. Before we dive in today, I want to send a huge thank you to our sponsors, Arkansas Manufacturing Solutions and Arkansas Workforce Connections. Their continued support and partnership throughout the year are truly what make these webinars possible, and we are very grateful for their partnership. And thank you all for being here today. If you're new to the deck and wondering what we do exactly, let me just give you a quick version. We're a private, nonprofit organization made up of seasoned international business professionals who work closely with current and aspiring exporters. Every deck member is appointed by the U.S. Secretary of Commerce based on our real world expertise in global trade. We bring a lot of experience across a wide range of industries. Now, we don't claim to have every answer, but chances are we know someone who does. At our core, the deck is all about connections. We aim to be your strategic partner in exporting and help you grow your business and your bottom line. My hope today is that you walk away feeling a little bit more confident in your exporting opportunities. And if questions pop up in the webinar that you don't want to ask in real time, that's no problem. Visit us at exportarkansas.org, and one of our council members will be happy to follow up with you. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter, which is packed with relevant international trade news and upcoming trade show opportunities. And I want to ask everyone a quick question. And don't worry, you don't have to answer it here out loud. But do you know an Arkansas company that is currently exporting? And if so, do you think that company would be a strong candidate for our Governor's Award for Excellence in Global Trade? We have a nomination form that is open right now. It's quick, it's easy to complete, and we'd love your help identifying our next winners. You can find that on our website as well. All right, it's my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Mr. Rudy Ortiz. Rudy is the owner of Strategic Business Services LLC, where he supports companies across a wide range of international business and exporting needs. He works closely with organizations entering new markets and serves as a U.S. partner with Global Market Entry Consultants, which are located in 32 different countries. Rudy holds an MBA in International Business, is a certified business professional, and serves as the DEX Education Chair. We're lucky to have him leading today's discussion. Rudy, thanks for all you do, and I'll turn it over to you.
Jonathan, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. You were saying that Tom is an expert and then more, when you look at his background, well, I tell you what, he's definitely the person that we need to provide this instruction today. Tom is the managing director of Blue Tiger International, and he has over 30 years assisting organizations, trade associations, and companies all over the world to manage their business models, supply chains, sales and development, purchasing, business decision making, vendor and contract management, and import export operations. Tom's obviously a trade expert who is committed to helping clients reduce supply chain risk and spend as well to improve performance and increase profitability. He's also an author of over 19 books on business management, global trade, and business development, including a 9-book series entitled The Global Warrior: Advancing the Necessary Skill Sets to Compete Effectively in Global Trade. And in addition to that, his latest book is Enterprise Risk Management in the Global Supply Chain. You might want to look at those books and pick them up so you can become an expert just like Tom. But with that, Tom, take it away.
Great. Thank you very much. Let me pull up the slide deck and get this thing going. Can we see that okay?
Yes.
Great. So thank you all for nice remarks and opening there and so forth. And just as a point of reference, I serve on the board of the New York District Export Council, which is where I'm based, and I'm serving my fifth term there, and I'm serving my third term at the national deck level in Washington. So I very much appreciate the work that all the district export councils do, and I think they're a very valuable resource in their local communities in helping companies not only deal with export issues, but to deal with all kinds of international trade issues that we're all facing and so forth. So I'm going to be happy to address questions as any of you have them as we do this, and comments. And you're also welcome because I'm going to share with you a lot of my opinions and express a lot of things, how I see things. And you're welcome to challenge anything that I say. So, Rudy mentioned about the books that I've written. I'm up to 21 now, and the latest book just came out a month ago, and it's on this whole subject that we're talking about today, managing and mitigating the impact of tariffs, pandemics, trade disruptions, and global supply chain. And I'd like to give somebody who's attending this event today a copy of the book. So, exactly, when this event is over, within 5 minutes of the event being over, if any of you can answer the question and send it to me, my contact information is on this page, and it's also on other pages throughout the thing. It's Tom Cook at bluetigerintl.com. If you can answer the question, why don't polar bears eat penguins correctly, then I will send you this textbook. So let's move on to the presentation. So I think anybody involved in global trade today is fully conscious of the fact that we're dealing in unprecedented times. We have much more chaos, disruption, and what I call unprecedented uncertainty in global trade. And just think about the fact that a procurement manager is looking to source goods in a particular country. And a year ago, the duty rate was 4.5%. 6 months ago, the duty rate was 15%. A month ago, the duty rate was 40%. And where do they go? They shifted potentially to another country, and possibly 2 months later, the duty rate might be raised on that country. So it creates a tremendous amount of uncertainty, and companies and individuals have to make decisions on how we sell our products abroad and how we buy products and services abroad. So, in trying to understand Trump's goals and processes, I want to spend a moment on that, but also really the key is here focusing on solutions, the strategies that we provide to companies as a consultant. So if we start off with the goals and processes, Trump wants to create reciprocity in global trade. If BMW manufactures a car in Germany and sells that into the United States, when that car passes through the border, the duty rate is 2.5%. If General Motors wants to sell a car into Germany, when it crosses the border into Germany, the duty rate is 17.5%. A significant inequity, no reciprocity whatsoever. And that inequity takes place all over the world, that there's an imbalance in what we charge for duties and tariffs and rates coming into the United States as compared to what we have on our export sales around the world. So he's banging companies on the head all over the world with these additional tariffs, okay, in order to get companies to come to the table to offer lower duty rates on U.S. export sales. And while the process that he's using is very disruptive, there's no question about that, he's actually gotten as many as 57 countries around the world already to have lowered their duty rate on U.S. products being sold into those countries. And from what I understand from the Department of Commerce, there's as many as another 60 countries that are negotiating with the International Trade Administration to lower their duty rates as well. So the process is not good, but the results are there to a greater extent. He's also looking to get further investment of companies to build manufacturing locations or make investment in structures here in the United States. And depending upon the numbers that are presented, he seems to have a high degree of success. And in our own business, and I'm a mid-sized company, but we have as many as 50 projects going on across the country where manufacturing is coming back to the United States. So there's certainly a degree of success. And a lot of those projects are being generated by foreign companies' investment here in the United States. So a key responsibility of most executives, I'm sure a lot who are listening into this webinar, is that we're trying to create resiliency in the global supply chain. I used to use the words heavily resilience and sustainability, but sustainability issues are kind of putting on a shelf right now because companies are in a survivability mode right now. So resilience is really the key issue that companies are trying to look at. And in normal times, we have geopolitical issues that we're facing all the time. Things are changing around the world. Economic issues, ups and downs all over the world. We have war and terrorism, and obviously in the last 60 days, we're at war with Iran, and the outcome of that remains to be seen. But the impact of it, everybody's feeling because ships are stuck in the Strait of Hormuz. The price of energy has gone up. There are all kinds of restrictions, limitations on air freight, passenger air, because the lack of accessibility to jet fuel, and the costs are rising pretty dramatically just for the individual who gasses up their car at the pump. Weather issues, we know climate change is a big factor. The general hazards of international shipping, bad players in international trade, and the factors of things that are changing with U.S. Customs, not only here in the United States, but places all over the world. It threatens trade, it threatens margins, it threatens resilience and sustainability, okay? And on top of this, our president, through executive order, is changing how our U.S. Customs is focused more now on enforcement rather than trade facilitation. So resilience and what I refer to as stability is in jeopardy, okay? And the big issue that we have with that and the idea of being able to manage within this circumstance is the ability to successfully navigate all these challenges and maybe certainly not eliminate, but to mitigate these things so their impact is not as negative as they seem to be. Excuse me. So our ability to do this is determined by three factors. One is our ability to pivot quickly and shift our position, okay? And a point that I'm going to make is diversification in our sourcing portfolio or diversification in our export sales portfolio. If we have multiple diversified sources and one particular country gets hit hard with a tariff or a duty or a sanction, we have an ability to quickly shift to other countries where we already have a relationship. Yes, we could focus on all the eggs in one basket and arrange a very good deal, but with that creates a significant risk and exposure. A better option, which might be somewhat more expensive, is to diversify both our sourcing portfolio of where we bring goods in from overseas, maybe bring some back here to the United States, but the same thing on the export side is not to be focused on one particular country, because if we lose access to that market, we lose then our export sales, but to have several markets, and the more that you have, the better off circumstances are. To have resources, and that's where I think the local district export councils come into play, is that they have a lot of expertise of people who've been involved in international trade, both in importing and exporting on there as part of their membership, and they're available to assist you, okay? And lastly is creative and diligent solutions, and I'm going to share with you the ones that we use with our client base. So as an example, resilience and stability, global sourcing. Again, having diversified sourcing and multiple providers. Carrier selection. Work with carriers that provide routing options and contingency planning. As an example, if a steamship line regularly moved its goods through the Strait of Hormuz, which we now know is being blocked, right? But they've created options to go around the Cape of South Africa, that would be a much better circumstance. It adds 2 to 3 weeks more transit time. It may add $200 or $300 per container more, but at least the goods will eventually get where they need to be versus being stuck in the Strait of Hormuz, of which from what I understand, there are more than 200 vessels that are sitting in a holding pattern. Okay. Safety stock that every company is always concerned about. Increase it. If you're at a 15, 20% level, move it up to 60, 70% level. You're at a 90% level, maybe move it to 150% level, right? Obviously adds cost, but safety stock creates a level of safety. And not thinking about storing it all in one location where there could be a vulnerability if something happens at the location, but storing it at various locations so you diversifying where you have inventory in case something happens in one particular location. And with climate change and the threats of fires and tornadoes and hurricanes, things like that, having it in multiple places really provides a significant, what we call risk management tool. So as an example, and I think examples kind of walk us through how some of these options that are available to us, is a client came to us in the middle of 2024 and asked us to do an analysis of their supply chain, what we call threat analysis, to determine where we felt that they had certain exposures. The company is based in Northern California, and they're part of an industrial location, and they use a high volume of petroleum in their manufacturing process because they make plastic components mainly for the medical products field and some other high-end fields. And they have in place a purchase agreement with a Saudi-based energy company going back 15 years, where 100% of that energy that they require through the petroleum purchases is accomplished. So as we did the analysis, we knew that in December of 2024, that come the middle of January, there was going to be a new president, and that president, through his process of getting elected, made it clear that he was going to go after Iran and do everything he can to protect them or protect us from them getting a nuclear weapon, and also damage their impact and all their proxies and all their outreach of terrorism locally in the Middle East and around the world. So we went back to the C-suite in this company and said to them that you really have a vulnerability where all of your raw material product is coming from a single source in the Middle East. And with a new president coming in, you could have likely some event or a series of events that prevents you from obtaining that product. So what we'd like to do is to view where you could have options to get at least two additional sources and move a high percentage equally between the other two. So we helped them negotiate a contract with a supplier down in Galveston, Texas, and with a supplier in Canada. And 70% of their purchasing moved to those two organizations. We also increased their safety stock, should have made note here, to two locations to 200%. So appreciate the fact that in the summer of 2025, Trump went after Iran by sending high-end bombers and taking out some of their nuclear capability. And then obviously 65 days ago, went after them with a significant amount of force combined with the efforts of Israel. Okay. And as a result of that, I'm not sure that they thought through this correctly, but the Strait of Hormuz has been closed all this time frame. This particular gateway out of Saudi Arabia is now closed. So if they were dependent upon this regular flow of petroleum products, they would have lost access to that. And appreciate that other companies have also lost access all over the world. So everybody's now vying at a limited number of places in order to get replacement of petroleum-related products. This company proactively now already had two options that controlled 70% of the volume that they were purchasing, and they just increased their purchasing with those two new companies to fill that void. Okay. Excuse me. So a risk management strategy that can show easily a high degree of success. I happen to smoke cigars. The CEO of that company sent me a nice box of Cuban cigars because of our ability to anticipate what might happen. That did happen. and now they're in a much favorable position than one where they would be in serious trouble. Risk management is the key words here, okay? So there was an increased short-term cost of energy, plus the costs associated with the additional storage capacity, but it created the ability to survive any energy disruptive event, which actually did happen. So over the years, and we started back in the early 1990s, we started to work on projects that were related to tariff mitigation. So from around 1992 to the present, we've had lots of projects involved. And as a result, we've identified as many as 20 different solutions that companies can have, excuse me, in mitigating the impact of disruptions, tariffs, and so forth. So I've highlighted a bunch of these here that are in blue, but all these are options. The ones that are in blue, I'm going to kind of talk a little bit more about as we go through these things. But a copy of this presentation is available to you, and we also offer any of the members of the deck or anybody on this call that we give a 2-hour free consultation. So if any of these show of interest to you, you're more than welcome to reach into us, and we'll be happy to explain to you how these things work in more detail relative to your specific supply chain. The first area is trade compliance management. Most people think of people in trade compliance as naysayers, meaning they're saying this is, you can't sell to here, you can't buy from here, you got to do it this way, and so forth. And they'd be kind of a problem for a company. But in other companies, trade compliance management can look at things proactively and advise what countries do we have free trade agreements with? Okay. How can we revise the classification in order to get a lower duty rate? Trade compliance can be utilized, okay, to take advantage of circumstances where there might be betterment or mitigation of circumstances. The way we go about the analysis is we break down the landed cost of merchandise. This model here looks at an import transaction. Acquisition cost, freight, customs clearance, duties and taxes, inland freight, warehousing, or what we call last mile delivery. We break it down to these silos because it then easy allows us to introspectively look in these particular areas to see where we can impact risk, cost, or business process improvements. Okay. And we've tweaked this over the years. We used to have 3 silos, then we went to 4, and now we're at 5. We're actually contemplating a 6th one, but we're not through beta testing it. The process has us looking at it from a 4-step manner. The first step is assessment. It's an intellectual review of a company's supply chain, how it handles its import-export activity. From that introspective review, we make recommendations, and those recommendations, we create a financial model to say, here's what your costs would be with this recommendation, and here's what the ROI will be on that transaction. Collaboratively, once this is established, we then create an operational model which answers the question, what does the company have to do in order to make any of these changes actually successful in their supply chain? Okay. And then lastly, once we have those 3 first steps taken care of, is implementation. Normally, these programs from beginning to end will take about 60 to 90 days, but because the U.S. government has slowed a lot of things down in programs here where we have to interface with the International Trade Administration or Customs, we bring it up to maybe as much as 140 to as many as 180 days it takes to go from beginning to end. But it's a reasonable amount of time to be able to do this analysis and then bring it to a point of value to a company. So the first one I want to highlight here is the foreign trade zone. Foreign trade zone allows an importer, either in manufacturing or in distribution or both, to import goods from overseas and not have to customs clear it or pay duties or taxes as it enters that FTZ facility, crosses the border, okay, until it exits that facility. And if anything is exported from the facility, there's no obligation to pay duty or taxes because the goods would never have entered the United States. Bonded warehouses also do the same thing. But the big difference between the foreign trade zone and the bonded warehouse are two issues. One is the bonded warehouse only allows us 5 years to keep goods in the facility, but in the foreign trade zone, it's an indefinite period of time. In the bonded warehouse, if it comes in as a widget, it has to go out as a widget. We cannot materially change the product. We can repack, remark, relabel, do quality control, but we can't materially change. In a FTZ, we are allowed manipulation, assembly, manufacturing. Okay, so the FTZ model works both for distribution and for manufacturing. And when we talk about reshoring into the United States, the FTZ is an excellent model for allowing reshoring to occur. FTZs have the benefit of what's called tariff inversion. Parts, components, raw materials come in at an HTS number, a duty rate. Finished product is completed, and when it leaves, it's at a lower duty rate. Tariff inversion allowed us to use the outbound HTS and duty rate, providing additional savings. But our president has put that tariff inversion benefit temporarily on hold. Okay. And we've been told that sometime in the fall, that hold will be released and we'll end up having that benefit back again. Foreign trade zones are controlled by the Department of Commerce, the International Trade Administration, and U.S. Customs, CBP. Bonded warehouses typically operate in major gateways, port areas, airport areas, and so forth. Foreign trade zones also operate in those areas, but also can operate miles inland, right? We've done ones in the middle of some of the largest states in the United States, nowhere near any gateway. So as a case study, we worked on a company in Baltimore, and they're a fuel supply company. And if you look at this picture here, that's their actual facility. This company imports approximately $100 million of raw petroleum products from overseas. It can hold the product for 9 months before the sale. So the first benefit that they get from the foreign trade zone is that they're able to defer their duty obligation for 9 months. The cost of money is very expensive today, so that cash flow advantage is a huge advantage. So we created a foreign trade zone at their facility, and their costs in doing this annually are about $160,000. Most of that cost is an upgrade in their technology and was going to be spread out over the first 2 years of the operation, and then will start to dwindle year after year, against $3.4 million of savings. So you can see the ROI that's involved with this right up front. Many companies don't realize, particularly when they purchase from China, that there's a belief they're dealing directly with the factory, and they may be communicating directly with the factory, but there is a middleman who's between them and the factory as a sales or a purchasing agent. And that intermediary party generally will take a commission or a fee for providing that intermediary relationship between the buyer here in the United States and the actual manufacturer, and most likely in China. Okay, so the first sale is a program with customs where they say to the importer, if you can evidence that intermediary's involvement, you can discount the value declared to customs by that amount paid to the intermediary, and really we're only concerned about collecting duty on the amount that's going to actually be paid to the factory. So in this particular case, we had a Houston oil company importer. They paid in a transaction to a supplier $155,000. The commission to the buying agent was 10%. So they reduced their amount of declaration to customs by close to $15,000, moving it to $139,500, and the duty rate on this particular product was 50%. Okay, so they saved per transaction $7,500 on an annual basis with 30 shipments, they saved more than $200,000. Again, seeing the ROI on an opportunity that's available to us.
Hey,
Tariff,
Tom, sorry to interrupt. I think we've got a question for you before we get too far
no problem.
removed.
Go right ahead.
Mike, you're on mute. Well, maybe not. Okay. All right. Well, sorry to interrupt.
You could also put it in the chat for you as well, Jonathan.
Sure, no worries.
He's
I'll keep an
having,
eye on it.
if he has a problem with the
The
sound.
microphone.
Okay, so tariff engineering is another program that's available, and it's an interesting program because what it actually accomplishes is the ability for a company to manipulate how how its product is manufactured, the process of manufacturing, along with the materials used to manufacture the product. And what it enables a company to look at is that maybe if we alter these things in the manufacturing process, we can change what HTS number would be utilized and therefore lower the duty rate when the goods enter the United States. So an example of this is we worked with actually a German company, and that was an auto truck products parts company selling to the United States at an annual volume of $500 million. So it was a pretty good sized company. Steel made up approximately 30% of the imported values at 15%. So they were paying approximately about $22 million in duties. Our engineers were able to replace 50% of the products that they were bringing in with a composite material replacing the steel, impacting and lowering the tariff by approximately $10 to $11 million less in duties annually. So a slight change in the manufacturing process and adding in a composite material replacing steel eliminated the additional duty that was being paid on steel once that duty was changed here in the United States. Another area that we look at is a lot of companies have a choice to make. Do I move something by air freight? Do I move something by ocean freight? And the reality is that air freight is 18 times more expensive than ocean freight when you look at it as a per kilo or per cubic meter basis. Okay. So why do we move by air freight? Well, in a lot of cases, it has to do with the fact that they have to rush an order over or come back into the United States or sell something that's done over quickly. And when we look at why are they rushing these shipments around, the reason really falls into play that something failed in the demand planning process. So we look very intrusively into the demand planning process to determine whether or not there could be changes in the demand planning process. And usually it's a technology solution, okay, and eliminate or reduce the need for air freight, which obviously is so much more expensive. And we average, when we look at this, as much as 15 to 20% in freight savings when we look at this and make changes to demand planning. Excuse me. A Texas-based industrial products importer has a spend of $83 million annually. So it's a pretty good sized company, of which 40% was utilized for expedited and air freight shipping. In our study, we assessed that only about 4% of the expedited spend was justified. We were able to determine that the main reason for the increased expedited and air freight shipments was poor demand planning operations. So we brought in a technology which they had to pay for, which cost them $87,000. But we were able to reduce their freight spend by $15 million annually. Okay. So when you really think about it, it was an insignificant spend, less than $100,000, that brings them about a savings of $15 million because they now can move everything in, or they have more time to move it by ocean freight, which obviously is significantly less expensive. We have friendshoring, nearshoring, and reshoring. Friendshoring, and we'll compare this to if we were using China as a main means of sourcing. Friendshoring is bringing it to a country that we have a more friendlier relationship with, and one in which the tariffs and duties are less expensive than they are out of China. South Korea, Taiwan, Vietnam, Malaysia, India would be an example of that. Nearshoring is bringing it physically closer to the United States, moving it to Mexico, Dominican Republic, certain countries in Central America would be examples of that. Reshoring is bringing it back to the United States, where we open it up. As I mentioned earlier, the foreign trade zone is a great model to make that happen. So we were approached 2 years ago by a New Jersey importer of food oil additive from China. Excuse me. They saw tariff increases from 15% to 25% and then to 50%. We found an alternative supplier in the Mexican maquiladora program. And the maquiladora program is a swath of land that goes along the border between California and Texas with Mexico, and allows companies that manufacture there to import parts and components without paying duties on it, manufacture products that end up shipping into the United States, and under the USMCA agreement, if it qualifies, comes in duty-free. Okay. So when we did the analysis, the acquisition cost was 7% higher, but the landed cost, the total cost of getting the goods into the country, was very comparable. And there were also now additional savings and oversight, because it was a lot easier to oversight a factory in Mexico than one in China. Okay. Travel costs to Mexico, a lot less than they are to China, and so forth. And lead times were made better because the distance in terms of travel was 2 or 3 days to bring it into the United States as compared to 6 to 8 weeks to bring it into the United States from China. Reshoring. Politically correct and in some business models can be achieved successfully, but the challenge is that we're trying to create a financial model. Appreciate the fact that two things we have going against us. They're positive things, but negative things from a modeling standpoint, which is we have a high cost of labor, okay, and energy, right? Those are two issues that come into play. Domestic intermediary, okay. This we use because we get approached a lot by foreign manufacturers that are selling here into the United States. And the typical scenario is that the foreign manufacturer might have a sales office here in the United States, or a maintenance or customer service office here in the United States. But when they create the sale from overseas to the United States, they ship the goods directly and bill them directly. So within inside of that transaction invoice is their profit. So if a company in a transaction average makes 30, 40, 50% markup on that, they're paying duty on that markup within that transaction. So what we do is we look at trying to create a circumstance where they can use their sales or customer service office here in the United States to help actually facilitate the sale. So in this case here, we had a foreign Italian metal product manufacturer with this US sales-based office. So instead of it selling it directly to the customer, they do a internal transfer to the US-based subsidiary, okay? They can do it at a wholesale market price, which reduces the value declared to customs by 42%, which means directly you're lowering your duty rate by 42%, okay? In this particular case, this company had $250 million worth of sales into the United States, and they're saving almost $17.5 million in duty. Now, the subsidiary has a income tax issue with the U.S. government, but that's only at $2.5 million, right? Which gives them a net of $14.5 million annually by just doing the transfer of the goods through their subsidiary rather than selling directly to the buyer of the product. Okay. So these types of strategies fall into this category of risk management. Okay. And the key issue here is that what we're really trying to do is to stop chasing cost and working towards obtaining the best value for your spend. and highlight that perspective. Stop chasing cost and work towards obtaining the best value for your spend. That's a risk management attitude. And that risk management attitude has to really be established as a culture in a company. Because many people in supply chain, procurement, logistics, and various operational responsibilities are always being pressed by their management team to reduce their operating costs. And I understand that theoretically, but you can only beat up a vendor or a supplier or a carrier to a certain extent. If you beat them up too much, then they're going to look to reduce the quality of their services or the quality of their products or other corners that they can cut in order to make a profit in the transaction. The better thing is to say, well, if I'm going to spend $1, let me get it for 85 cents. What I'd rather see you say is I want to spend $1, but I'm going to get $1.15 worth of value. That's a better negotiation and has a higher degree of success and becomes a risk management approach in how you manage your supply chain. One of the things that our president is doing is he's moving what has been available as a mindset of U.S. Customs offices in the United States that they serve the general public as trade facilitators. Excuse me. Trump has turned that around and said, not anymore. Through executive order, they're now considered trade enforcement officers working for Department of Homeland Security and Treasury in the collection of duties and taxes. And he is going after specific areas of valuation, origin, harmonized tariff number, and has added into the mix that customs is now able to ask the question of an importer, besides receiving a copy of a packing list and a commercial invoice, asking for a bill of materials, okay? And in that bill of materials, line item, the individual pieces of material and parts that make up the total and what the percentages of value against the total, okay? And has created a specific task force between Customs, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, where potentiality of fraud is being committed. And if it's being considered as intentional, willful, or egregious, go after the importer as not just a civil case, but also potentially a criminal case. And we've seen an uptick since the fall of last year to today with a number of cases coming in, which would normally be something that if we had a problem with customs, we correct the problem with the client, we show how the problem was collected, we might pay what duties are now due and potentially a small fine. We get a slap on the wrist and we move forward. Now, Customs is doing a much deeper dive, digging much deeper into the company's operations, asking for a lot more information, looking at a lot more documentation, and issuing significant fines and penalties. And we do have a couple of cases that have been elevated to the criminal level because if Customs wants to, they can seize access to your email exchange. And if they see that you directed a supplier to lower the value on a commercial invoice or change the HTS number and so forth like that, then that becomes in that category of egregious and willful. So the culture of the agents are changing, and he's added 30% in the additional major gateways in the country of people involved in enforcement. Okay. The other thing that he's doing is he's changing what has always been the traditional rules of what we call substantial transformation. If you take a BMW, which manufactures a car in Italy, really what they're doing, not in Italy, where they manufacture it in Germany, what they're really doing in Germany is they're assembling the car in Germany. The wheels might come from France, the engine block from Italy, the electronic components from China, the leather for the seating from Brazil, and so forth. The rule with U.S. Customs has always been the country of origin is not all these different countries, But the country of origin is where did it become a car? So if it was substantially transformed from all these parts and components to an automobile in Germany, then Germany would be the country of origin. And Trump is specifically changing that rule, and he's specifically going after goods that come out of two countries, one being Vietnam and the other being Mexico. In both of those cases, Chinese companies have moved a number of their factories down to Vietnam or across the ocean to China. We've actually helped facilitate a number of Chinese companies enter into the Mexican maquiladora program. And the position that Customs is now taking under executive order is that are they really now made in Mexico or Vietnam, or is it just a shifting of Chinese manufacturing to those countries? So they're asking for bills of materials from products coming from those countries. And if the importer here in the United States is unable to show a predominance of value add, of Vietnamese value add or of Mexican value add, they can't say made in Mexico or Vietnam. They have to provide a bill of materials, and they only get credit for the value add of Mexico and Vietnam. The others, they pay duty rates against the value of what really is the origin country, which in this case is China. So he's clearly changing the culture and how things are being done. Every importer should be very conscious of this and be very wary of this, and appreciate the fact that this mindset of how what's happening is impacting how countries are dealing with U.S. exports going overseas and scrutinizing and making the import process in those countries somewhat difficult if the United States is of origin. So it's not just a consequence to importers, it's also a consequence to American exporters around the world. So, as we all know, the president lost the conversation with the Supreme Court on reciprocal tariffs. So there are IEPA refunds, and it's fortunate to say that if you have done the refunding process correctly, we see now money flowing out of the Treasury to back to U.S. companies. So they set up a process called CAPE, okay? And it's actually working, but the key issue is making sure that all your files are in order, okay? So our list here, we say, seek professional guidance. There's lots of trade attorneys, consultants, qualified custom house brokers that you can use to. Assess the risk versus the gain. Get your files in order. Audit them, either internally or externally. Follow the instructions that Customs is giving on how to file those claims. And they're very specific on what needs to be done. And payment is very unlikely to happen in the short term. It's taken several months for it to mature, but it has happened. And lastly, if you're not CTPAT certified, both as an importer and exporter, you should become Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism certified, because it elevates your compliance and security profile with both Customs and the Bureau of Industry and Security, which only works to your benefit, particularly if you end up having a problem with either Customs or the BIS. So CTPAT is that voluntary program. It raises your profile of compliance and security. You gain access to benefits, less inspections, less scrutiny, goods move through the border faster. You get a customs account manager assigned to your business. You get a get out of jail free card, meaning you get to mitigate your circumstances in the event the problem occurs, okay? And less inspections and faster clearances. General import checklist, EIN number, letter of instruction to the broker, PO management systems, HTS, valuation, origin data, record keeping. Keep in mind for imports and exports, record keeping is for 5 years. We have to make sure that we're documenting, particularly on imports, that we don't have forced labor anywhere in our supply chain. And it's not just checking your primary suppliers, but you have to check the tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers to your primary supplier, that there aren't circumstances. We had an apparel company in New Jersey that we did a review of their forced labor issues in China, and we clearly determined that all their primary suppliers had no forced labor. But several months later, certain containers were seized by customs in Port Elizabeth, because customs determined that the buttons on the clothing had come from a Western province in China where there was suspicion of forced labor. Okay. So it became a very difficult process to prove that there wasn't forced labor, but customs held on to those goods for almost 4 months before they released it. So appreciate that. That's pretty dramatic in a supply chain when something's held up that way. And always appreciate that when we import and we export, we have to be concerned with other government agencies, ATF, FTA, USDA, CDC, and so forth. Making sure that we're using the correct tariff and duties, and appreciate that in today's world, there are layering of these duties and tariffs, that we're responsibly following reconciliations where we need to. We have the ability to file protests when we don't agree with what position customs is taking. We also can use post-entry corrections as a process to make changes. There's always going to be drayage and inland freight in our business model. Deconsolidation breaks down containers, okay, as compared to consolidation, which builds them up, okay. And when you're operating and you get a letter in your office that has the CB28 number on it, that's where customs is opening up an investigation, and they're letting you know by telling you that they need certain documents or they're asking you a certain question, okay. That's the time to get professional help to make sure you don't step on your toes or step on your feet and say or do something incorrectly. If we're thinking about setting up a compliance program, point person gets established, senior management support because it covers different silos in a company. So you need the senior level management to manipulate that for you. Sometimes setting up a committee of stakeholders has value, creating procedures, SOPs, introducing technology, and AI has a lot of elements that are available to it in trade compliance management. Training of people on a regular basis, particularly new ones that come into your operation, and annual revisits of certain subject matter. Doing audits of your supply chain. You ask the question, how do you know you're doing things correctly? You don't know until you check and recheck and check again. Resource development and outreach. And again, there are lots of resources available to you. Your district export councils, particularly the one in Arkansas, which does a really good job at providing information and the availability of their membership and their board of having expertise that's available to you. Okay. And we all know that there's on the import side, we're using custom house brokers, and many of them can be used as a resource to you. So in summary, understanding how resilience and sustainability are achieved, culture from the top drives the approach, risk management is the concept that we use, okay? The 20 solutions that we talked about, stop chasing costs and obtain the best value for your spend. Culturally, it's a much better process. At the end of the day, there's much more gain in a company's safety, security, sustainability, and resilience when you stop chase costs and obtain the best value for your spend. Also appreciate that since COVID, the elevation of supply chain and the supply chain manager in all business models. And that's a good thing. Salaries have increased, their importance have increased. And I see now in some of the bigger corporations bringing into the C-suite a chief supply chain officer, which is really a good thing. And again, coming back to the first slides where we see a lot of chaos and disruption and uncertainty, appreciate that there's opportunity for those who seek to find solutions, see success where others only see problems and despair, and being diligent, showing persuasiveness and creativity trump the chaos and disruption. So with that, I appreciate everybody's kind attention. I appreciate the opportunity from the Arkansas deck to present this to you. And I'm certainly available to answer any questions and so forth. And remember that if any of you know the answer to that question, just send me an email. And the first one that I get in, I will send you that new book that just came out. So again, thank you. Everybody be safe and well.
Right. Mr. Cook, that was awesome. Thank you very much. Rudy, I don't know if you're able to join back on or not. We do have a couple of questions here for you. The first one being, what's the best way to procure a full container load freight cost from Southeast and Far East Asia to the U.S. in the current times of a space crunch and rising freight cost? Yeah.
I think that this is where the role of the freight forwarder, the 3PL, and the custom house broker comes into play. These guys do this every day. They have either offices or agent structure all over the world, and you have to develop relationships with these companies that are local to your market. And you can reach into me, and I can give you companies that we work with that do a very good job. So you're welcome to reach into me, ask. But that's where we go to. When I'm looking to see what the market conditions are and pricing, I talk to the freight forwarders and brokers that I work with. And it may take them a day to get back to me, but they'll give me the information I need. I can do comparative analysis between two or three companies and then choose the one that not only offers obviously the competitive price, but you want to make sure that the timing of the voyage falls into scope with what it should be, and that they're not moving product to 3 or 4 different locations before it comes into the port that we're looking to. So that's really the best way to do it. There are some technologies available that will show you pricing, but they're generally always posted on the higher side, not the most competitive side, and so forth. So it's really important to establish a good working relationship with a freight forwarder, custom house broker, 3PL that has this reach into the corners of the world that you're buying from and can provide to you competitive pricing. And again, if you need any references, I can give you a number of companies that we work with that do a really good job at that.
Great. Okay. Next question we had was, when evaluating supplier diversification that you touched on earlier, how do you determine the right balance between dual sourcing, multi-sourcing, and supplier consolidation? This gentleman's asking because their company they source raw materials and hardware for the products that they make here in the state.
Right. So I would answer this question first by saying single sourcing should be eliminated in your profile immediately. And we usually use as the guideline, you should have 2 to 3 additional sources besides your primary source that you have. And if China is your primary source and you're buying 100% from China, you should bring that down to a 30% number and find 2 other suppliers in 2 other countries that will each take 35% of the supply. This gives you the ability, if all of a sudden Trump goes after China again and increases the tariffs to China, you can move production to the 2 other facilities. So we try to minimally create at least 3 sources for what we call diversified sourcing. When you go beyond that, I think you're then extending yourself out too thin and you really can't concentrate any spend, and therefore you're going to end up paying a little bit more. So we think the magic number is 3, having 3 suppliers kind of almost split equally between the three companies, or the three places, is really the best model. And we've had more than 30 years of success creating that kind of model. And we get accolades all the time from our clients when situations arise and they get stuck, but they see that they now have an ability to shift very quickly to focus on one particular supplier that can pick up the slack from the others if some disruption event occurs. And the other thing that we're looking at even more aggressively now is when we move it to another country, we want to create physical spreads out. So the example would be, if you looked at China and you said, I'm going to move it just China to Vietnam, geographically, the countries border each other. They're right there on top of each other. Maybe India would be a better option because geographically it's nowhere near China. Okay. And therefore, any, geographical type of event occurs in a region, you won't be so impacted. Because if you use Taiwan, Vietnam, South Korea, and China as your sourcing points, right, you could have a physical event that could impact all those countries in one shot. So we're starting a little bit more often now to look at a physical difference in those three choices that you make, and looking to do it in really three parts of the world, so you don't have to really be concerned with concentrated disruptions.
Yeah.
That's
Tom,
that's some solid advice.
Tom, this is Rudy. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Oh, very good. So Brandon Harville, who is with Arkansas Manufacturing Solutions, asked the question, and I don't think it was been covered already. In your experience, how are tariffs and disruption risks different for small to medium-sized manufacturers versus large OEMs? And what should the small businesses be doing differently to manage them?
The difference that I see is that larger companies have much more resources to draw upon, and they usually have greater funds available to draw upon to to search out what their mitigating strategies can be, to more proactively work. They could assign additional people to tasks just involved in risk management and so forth. Where smaller companies and mid-sized companies don't have that amount of personnel. The people wear lots of different hats in those smaller mid-sized companies. They don't have the funding available to really develop all the resources and so forth. So we find the larger companies can generally find their way through, the diversity and problems that occur much more easily. The smaller, medium-sized companies, which is really the market that I'm in. I mean, we do have some Fortune 500 companies as clients, but most of our clients are in that small and medium-sized category. Is you got to find companies like ours, my company, Blue Tiger, and there's lots of them out there. And I'm sure a lot of the leadership in your deck knows who these companies are. Even Rudy does, I know, consulting work. But the idea is that in a small, medium-sized company, you have to establish some really good resources, trade attorneys, trade consultants, really good freight forwarders, custom house brokers, and 3PLs that really have knowledgeable people on their teams that go way beyond just handling freight. They have a lot of knowledge about international trade, and lean on them, okay, to help you navigate through all these challenges. All the solutions on that one page, the 20 solutions that are out there, are readily available, whether you're a $5 billion company or you're a $50 million company. Okay. They're out there available to you to navigate and so forth. And as I mentioned earlier at one point, is that you certainly can reach into our company. We give you a 2 hour free consultation, and we certainly could listen and hear what you are, and we can help point you in directions of things that you could potentially do that are specific to your supply chain. And there are a lot of people at the deck I'm sure can help you in Arkansas, and you also have access to the national deck, which has a much wider view as well. And there are a lot of people there that are very willing to help and have a lot of knowledge that's available to you. And most of the time, there's no costs or responsibilities involved attached to that.
Yeah. Tom, I think the last thing we're going to cover is a kind of a comment. Earlier, you were talking about maquiladoras and nearshoring and friendshoring and reshoring. And, the fact that even though some of the costs may be higher if you went to, let's say, Mexico, the fact that you would have savings in other areas. And one of the things that you kind of alluded to, but I want to make a little bit clearer, is the fact that if you have your source in Mexico, uh, it also means that you're saving not only on logistics, but also in inventory. You don't have to have as much inventory if your sources are closer versus, let's say, China that could take, even during good times, 40 days. So do you have any thoughts or comments on that?
I think that's a very valid point. You know, um, I think that the closer you are to your source, then you don't have to worry about having as much safety stock in your inventory. And certainly Mexico is significantly closer. The 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 um, the delivery time from Mexico will be between 7 and 10 days as a general statement to almost anywhere in the United States, where it's going to take, 6 weeks to get from China to the west coast of the United States. And obviously to the Gulf or the East Coast, you have to add another couple of weeks. So, it clearly presents an inventory savings and so forth. But again, the key issue here is that landed cost model. If you're looking to see where risk and cost can be addressed, it's not just the acquisition cost, but you have to look at the acquisition cost, the freight, the customs clearance process, the duties, taxes that you pay, and also the last mile delivery wherever it's going to and so forth. So all those components have to be brought into the decision making process.
Tom,
All
thank you
right.
so much. And Jonathan, do you have any comments or questions at this point?
Just we are well over time, but I do think that that last question in the chat is very important for people to know. What are the latest tariff rates, and how can people keep up with? I mean, they're always changing. How can people keep up with them to know where to get the supplier from?
There's no one single source to go to. I have two team members, analysts, and between them, they split 20 sources of information. They sit there during the day, all day long. They reach into those, each has 10 resources. They compile what changes have been made to all the duty rates for our particular client base. And then at the end of the day, they compare the notes between the two of them. And then our clients can reach into us and we update them on what it is. And it's an exhausting and expensive process to do that. Um,
Yeah, I was gonna say
and,
that sounds very tedious.
and it's interpretive. That's the other thing. That's why we at the end of the day, the two of them with their supervisor reviews that to make sure that we've dotted the I and crossed the T. And so I come out of the military and in boot camp, check, recheck, check again. It has stayed with me for a very long time. So they built that into their process, check, recheck, and check again. But one of the issues is that advice we gave on Friday of last week to
Hmm.
a company is different today because yesterday Trump put out notification that he's changing guidelines on steel, copper, and aluminum as a derivative in products, right? He hasn't announced the effective date, but he's announced that there's going to be lowering of the duties with certain countries on derivatives with so you know um, we have a president who acts some degree emotionally and some degree, with inconsistency of thought. And so it creates a much more difficult time. So my answer to the question as a general thing is you have to have multiple sources available to you, and you have to do a comparative to see where it's likely to it. If you have a single source, and they're wrong, then you're in trouble. Having multiple sources and comparison and comparing, you at least can make a better, more informed decision. But this is a very difficult time. Custom house brokers who do this work, trade attorneys and consultants are very valuable to have now in this marketplace as a resource to you. That's where I would go.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that. And again, thank you to everybody that's stayed around online as we ran well over, but I think it was well worth it. So, Mr. Cook, thank you again. And thank you to everyone for attending. And a special thank you to Arkansas Manufacturing Solutions and Arkansas Workforce Connections for your sponsorship. and allowing us to put these webinars on free of charge to the people. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.